Greetings. Hello, happy Sunday. We hope that you are well. Hope that you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength today. We certainly welcome you for this week's edition of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We are thankful for you joining us today for this very important topic that we are addressing: why the current crisis in Sudan, what is going on there, and why is it something that we should see as critically important to us, no matter where we are on the planet Earth. So thank you for joining us today. We start by acknowledging the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. Of course, these lands belong to no one except them. And you know, it's really interesting, you all. I saw a Facebook post this morning, and it was I think the actor, his name is Graham Greene. He's an indigenous actor. He's been in a number of programs, series, and whatnot. I remember him just off the top of my head from the Thunderheart, which was really a movie kind of playing on what happened to Leonard Peltier, the uh, American Indian movement activist who was framed and imprisoned and remains in prison today for 45 years. He's been there. But the movie starred Val Kilmer, and I know Graham Greene was in that movie. But in this Facebook post, he has a shirt on that's, making reference to the fact this is indigenous land. And then I read all the comments, and all of these low life scum are on there commenting, talking about, well, you're immigrants too. You walked over the Barren Straits to get here. And I read that and I'm thinking, these people are low rent, low life, garbage dwelling people. They really are, because they don't believe that. Because if they believe that, then that logic would also have to apply to all of these so-called, and I say that very sarcastically, immigrants who these people are so upset about being in the US and Canada right now. If that's the logic, that everybody was an immigrant and everybody just came here, then you should be, then those folks are just coming here because everybody's a damn immigrant and it shouldn't matter. But clearly these people don't feel that way. So it's just, the type of dishonest and illegitimate analysis that masquerades as intelligence in the society. And I don't know about you, but I'm so sick of it, so tired of it, so fatigued at having to pretend that people have intelligence when they clearly don't. And I don't know what you're going to do, but I'm going to continue to tell them you don't have any damn intelligence, and stop wasting our time with that nonsense. I'm not going to play along and pretend like they're saying something. They have a right to their opinion. They can go to hell with that backward ass opinion. I don't want to hear it, and you shouldn't want to hear it either. So we give honor and respect to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And we also, of course, give honor and respect to our African ancestors, who are without question the reason why we are here, and who give us the wisdom to continue this fight. And every day are telling me, and they're telling you too, whether you're focused enough to hear them or not, that's work you got to do. But every day they're telling me, stay the course, stay consistent, stay committed to truth and justice, and don't let anything sidetrack you from that. And it's very hard, but we do our absolute best to do that, because this is the reason why we are here, no question. And when this weekend, we kind of took a couple of days to recharge, went out to the country, and were able to sit there in our rig and just value this indigenous people's land, and just reflect on what we are doing in our lives, and just reinforcing that message that we have work to do. We have to continue to do this work, and that's what we're going to do, and be proud to be able to do it, honored to be able to do it. So let's move forward and just talk about just basically who we are, For those that don't know, Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the APRP. The APRP is, of course, a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party based in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which the definition of Pan-Africanism is the total liberation and unification of Africa under one continental socialist government. And I wish people would study this concept because, again, I saw comments, I read comments, that's why I don't generally read them because it's usually a waste of time. I'm sorry. But we were talking about one of the topics we had in recent weeks, Negro spokespersons for the capitalist class. And, African people are on there making comments like, well, what African tribe do you come from? I mean, I'm sorry, but that's the best you can come up with to counter an analysis. I mean, it's not even worth responding to. That's a problem that you have. If that's the best you can do to, and then someone else Kwame Ture sold us the program of the APRP and wanted us to make a vow of poverty. What the hell are you talking about? Who the hell? Where is this stuff coming from? Because it's certainly not coming from our work and the truth that our work is based in. And these people, they went to one work study meeting for the APRP, if that, and they came late to that, didn't study, didn't prepare for the damn meeting, nothing. And they leave that and they tell most of you, oh yeah, I was in the APRP. You goddamn liar. And you're worse than a liar. You're a dumbass if you listen to them and don't ask critical questions, holding them accountable to defaming honest and legitimate work that's happening to liberate our people and to make a contribution to humanity. I mean, I'm sure you can tell, like, I'm irritated by all this nonsense. And I don't understand why more of us aren't irritated by it. Well, I can't get irritated by it because I have to live. You call that living? That's not living. Just sitting here every day, consuming food, having sex, farting, belching, defecating every day. That's not living. That a lower level animal can do that. That's nothing. That's nothing. And the world would be better off if that's all people saw life as, if you weren't even here. I mean, that's just the absolute truth. I mean, I'm never, the day that I feel like that's normal to accept these types of realities that I'm talking about, I don't even want to be here. Please make that my last breath. The day I feel like, okay, this is normal, there's nothing I can do about it, I don't even want to live anymore after that, because I don't want to be like the rest of these cowardly, worthless, shoe stamp people that ain't worth a damn to themselves, or a disgrace to our ancestors, and are worth not even a penny. I would value a penny more than them. I mean, a penny has more value. So we're going to lift up that we're going to stand up and continue to challenge these backward ideas. I mean, this is insanity that we're living with here. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is exactly about that. And, for those people that want to understand it, Nkrumah's handbook is there. And it's there, and it's spelling out the strategy. And so if you have not studied it, I don't mean just skim through it, but if you have not studied it and don't understand this work, keep your mouth shut. Please keep your mouth shut, because if you talk about it and you disparage it without even understanding what it is, you're doing the work of the police. That's what you're doing. And you're so stupid, you don't even have sense enough to get paid to do police work. At least if you're gonna, I respect those people who sold out our struggle and got a paycheck for it. Then a lot of the people around here today, you don't even require that. You just run your goddamn mouth and do all their work for them and get nothing in return. I mean, just what a disgrace. And I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. And I'm going to continue. I hope that by saying the things I say, I hope it makes your head spin around 30 times. And I hope we can do more, because that's what we need to do. We need to challenge these backward ideas. And this program is one of the tools we use to do that. Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and Shakura. organizers for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, father daughter. Don't hate, because you can't talk to your daughter because she can't stand you because you're a worthless scum. Pick up your game, step up your game, become better at being a human being. We can help you do that. Even if you hate us, we'll help you do that because we're trying to get free. Not worried about anybody's ego and what their personal problems are. We got bigger fish to fry than that. So that's who we are. And to get us started, I'm going to turn this over to Shakura.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. Appreciate you, comrade. Appreciate you. Greetings, everyone. We hope you are well. We hope you're safe. I echo everything that Comrade Ajamu said, and I think that this work, it's going to continue to be important even when the novelty wears off, right? So, for folks that maybe had higher traffic and joining in the earlier part of this year, maybe because, you were interested in making a change or something was driving you to, want to do something about the conditions of the world. Maybe you're not joining as frequently now. Maybe you're not as consistent as you used to be because the novelty is worn off. And, we're fighting against years and centuries of propaganda that has been designed to push us out of being humane and to encourage us to be as self-centered and as individualistic as possible and as capitalist driven as possible, right? And so, excuse me, you have to work really, really hard to resist that. And first, you have to understand why you need to resist it, which means you need to understand the system itself and what it's doing to you. You need to understand the impact that it's having on you. You need to understand how that impact can impact your mental health, how it can impact your physical health, how it can impact your thought process, how you treat people, how you don't treat people. All of these things are a reminder and a reflection of the environment that we live in. And I'm talking about our economic environment. I'm talking about our humane environment. I'm talking about our social environment. All of those things, obviously, our physical environment, with us not taking care of the planet the way we should be, all of these things, right? And so I think, and understanding that, that's really the whole purpose of living under capitalism. If you are interested in falling into line and you're not interested in changing the conditions that we're currently suffering from, then you're doing the job that is expected of you, because that's exactly the purpose of this system, is to separate us as much as possible. This is why people embrace and they enforce those colonial terms, right? Where we see people saying, that they are African American or that they are Black. Even when I say those words, my heart stops and my brain kind of freezes because I don't use those terms at all. So when I do use them, my mind is telling me, you don't say that. Why are you saying that? Because I've already designed in my brain, that's a no-no. We don't say that. And I've shared with you all before, but it really takes understanding how you're supposed to push back against that. And I'll give some examples in just a moment. But the whole purpose of this system we live in is to separate us as much as possible. Why? Because if we come together, so Africans who are in the diaspora, if they unite and come together with other Africans in the diaspora, if they understand, like Kwame Nkrumah said so many years ago, that every African anywhere belongs to the African nation. So if we all understand that, then it does not matter where we were born. What matters is that we are all African, even if we're not currently on African soil. If we all understood that, that would be a tremendous amount of unification, a tremendous amount, which means we would have more than enough people power to fight back and to regain control, not just of one country in Africa, but the entire continent. We would be able to enforce socialism. We would be able to determine how it would be impacting us. We would be able to determine how the resources could be spent. We would have control of everything. We would have control of everything because 85% of the resources in the world come from our continent. That's where they come from. And so when we think more about what that looks like, that's why capitalism has to work twice as hard, Because if we are not interested in unifying because we're too busy enforcing colonial borders and saying, well, that's an African over there and I'm American, right? Or that's an African over there, but I'm African American. There's a difference when there's not. Then that's us doing the job for the oppressor. So the oppressor sits back, they clap and they say, good job, slave. You've done well today. You've made your master proud. Because now we're enforcing the puppeteer show that they wanted us to do in the first place, right? And so it's really going to take us really just kind of understanding that we have the power to change the circumstances, but you can never change anything if you're ignorant. You can't, because you don't have all the tools that are necessary to understand how you need to go about doing it. And if you're humble, then you'll admit that you don't have all the tools, because there's no way that you can already know how to solve a problem that you're barely coming up to face, because you're just now realizing that it's going to take you to help solve it as well. That's the other part of individualism, is that you don't have to think about working with other people, and you certainly don't have to take responsibility for anything, because why should you care about anything but yourself? So if you're able to bypass the individualism, if you're able to bypass the selfishness, if you're able to bypass the fact that you know that you need to tap into your humanity, you know that, and you've done that, then congratulations, you've accomplished quite a bit. But that still means that you have a lot to learn, even though you've been able to bypass those initial barriers, which is why you need to increase your political education. And we say this all the time, but it really is true. And that's why I said it's unfortunate, because the novelty is worn off, but you're still going to have to join an organization that's working for justice, even when the novelty is not attractive anymore, even when the bells are not as shiny, even when the whistle is not as loud. You're still going to need to understand that that's the only way that we're going to be able to accomplish this. If we continue to practice different methods that we think will make a difference under capitalism, that may work for you, and I would never say, that's not an effective way. But just personally speaking, I've been on this planet long enough where I'm old enough for 2 decades to have voted and have made a difference. And I am humbly proud to say that I have never, ever registered to vote, and I have still seen the situation remain what it has been. In some cases, it has gotten extremely worse, where colonized people or differently abled or LGBTQ, marginalized groups, the whole 9 yards, we have continued to be oppressed. And so, to me, in my mind, voting is not an effective solution. Because if I were to vote, I would still see nothing change, right? So if you agree that voting is an effective solution, good for you. Do what you need to do. But you know deep down, nothing is changing. You know that, because you're seeing the same outcomes that I'm seeing. Even if you live in another part of the world, you're still seeing people who are being treated badly just because they're poor. You're still seeing people who are being treated unfairly just because they are not men. You're still seeing people who are being treated horribly because they don't have a roof over their head. And so, therefore, everybody is qualified to ignore them. When in actuality, we truly need to acknowledge every living being on this planet, especially beings that are not humans, because animals and other beings tend to get discounted because human supremacy is a real thing as well. So these are the kind of things that we need to really think about. Whatever method you're using, if joining organization is not one of them, more power to you. But at some point, you have to realize that the situation is not changing. But if we continue to resist the colonizers, if we continue to push them out, if we continue to fight back, if we continue to let these folks know that they are not going to harm us anymore, that they are not going to hurt us, that they are not in control anymore, and if we truly, truly come together, we will see the impact that we need to see. We see it all the time in examples of media. We see it all the time in other cases where people are not able to solve the problem until they come together. And so, shout out to Hood Communists. I actually found an article on their website that I used for the World Geo section of my work study, which is where we intentionally try to find an article that is circling some other part of the world where a colonized group is being impacted. And so it's an opportunity for us in work study, not just to study the current reading that's been assigned, but to study other issues that are happening in the world that are still connected to oppression, that are still connected to colonization, and in some way still connected to Africa needing to be free at some point. And so Hood Communists published this article, What You Need to Understand About Imperialism in Sudan. What you need to understand about imperialism in Sudan. And they go into great detail about how Sudan has been split, which I'm sure we'll talk about more today. And the point I'm making to you is by increasing your political education, you are in a better position, A, to understand what some of the tactics are that Sudanese people have been doing to fight back, which is going to be important because then we can duplicate that, we can study it, we can replicate it, we can support them and sending more resources to them so they can continue to fight back. But more importantly, we can have a conversation about it because there are thousands of people outside of Sudan that have no idea what's going on. And it's really, really important to talk about these things so that we can start to help other people understand it's not just about them. And more importantly, it is not just about the US. Let's uncenter the US. Let's decentralize that, okay? And let's help other people understand what else is going on. And so that's where all that comes from. And I would just say, if you're really trying to resist propaganda and imperialism and capitalism and US supremacy, then you should start with understanding that the whole objective is for them to separate you and your communities. They don't just do it with African people, they do it with indigenous people. We have colorism within different groups where certain groups feel like they're more elite and better because they're lighter. We have other opportunities where there's classism within our groups and our respected communities. These are all systems designed to divide us, you all. And the sooner we realize that, the better off we really will be. Because at the end of the day, their job is done if we can't come together and organize for a better way. Their job is sufficient. They don't need to work any harder because we're actually doing their job for them. And so this is why we need to really have a better political education, because if we truly understood what our ancestors were trying to teach us, and if we continue to research what was being said, then we would understand that it's not the worst thing in the world to say that you're African. It's not a horrible crime that you're committing if you accept that that is in fact your identity. Next slide, please. If you were to accept it, you would have a better way of being able to navigate how you're supposed to help your people and your land become free. You would take responsibility for that. And you would understand that because Africa is not free, no African anywhere can truly, truly be free. Because as Dr. King said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And right now, Africa is seriously suffering from an injustice, seriously suffering. So we have to do everything in our power to try to help change those conditions, which means we have to understand how Europe and the US has been completely tied in to being a profitable startup because of Africa's exploitation, because of the stolen people from Africa, because of the stolen resources. The US literally got its start because Africa was available to them and they were able to take quite literally whatever pieces of the pie they wanted to take. And so just understanding that in great, great, great detail, understanding how insurance companies got started, understanding how the obstetrics gynecology medical subspecialty got started because of the unethical research done on enslaved African femme presenting folks, understanding how banks got started. I mean, you all know what I'm talking about, and maybe some of you don't, which is why you have to do your research. This is why, because you have to understand how it's all connected. You have to. That's why Comrade Ajamu always says the problem didn't start outside of Africa, it started in the motherland, which means we need to establish a way to fix it from there because then it can travel out and it can impact Africans everywhere. We need to understand, based on the Hood Communist article, that we need to find a way to be more like our comrade John Garang, right? Like we know the names of Dr. King and Malcolm X, but what about John Garang? This African sacrificed his life in more ways than one because he needed Sudanese people to understand what their power was. He needed them to understand you have an opportunity to resist this. You have an opportunity to fight back. You can organize against this. You don't have to let imperialism win. And this African understood the risk that were involved. This is why we have to put aside the individualism, you all, because this fight that we're doing, it's not about us. I hope that I can live on this earth long enough to continue to make a difference for African femme people when they labor their children. But in case I don't, I hope that the ancestors will understand I've done the best that I can. And if it's my time to go, I will accept that. But everything we do is not for us. It can't be because it's not just about us. And everybody else who came before us sacrificed and lost their life so that we could be here. So you can't tell me that you're just going to be as selfish as you are, and you're not even going to think about all the people who died so that you could be sitting here using your Wi-Fi today, sitting in your probably roofed apartment or domicile. And maybe you're not in a roofed area, maybe you're unhoused, but you're still in a position where you have resources, you have technology, you have oxygen, you have things that allow you to give thanks for being able to wake up today. That's all because your ancestors fought like hell. They fought like hell, where they literally fought off oppressors who were trying to murder and rape them so that you could be here today. And if you're not African, unfortunately, that statement is probably still true for you, where you had ancestors who fought oppressors and colonizers who were trying to murder and rape them as well. If you were colonized, that's probably a true statement for you. So we all have a responsibility because our ancestors did not die for nothing. They did everything they could to live on this planet as long as they could so that their outcomes, their next future generations could have a better way of navigating this space. And when we think about what sacrifice looks like, we think about John Garang, we think about the Sudanese people, we think about the Haitian people, we think about the Cuban people, we think about people who are in every country in Africa waking up and acknowledging that they want to fight back, that they want to sacrifice, that they understand that this is not in vain and that we are fighting for something great. We are fighting for the opportunity for African people to be free and to have control. And most importantly, to finally be respected because it's our resources and we should be able to decide how they're being used. We should be able to determine how the resources and the profit from those resources can be put back into the continent. I will close with these last two statements. If you are in an organization that's working for justice, then that means you understand how important your role is. That means you understand how important your role is, even as it relates to the language that you use, which means if you're in an organization that's working for justice, or if you are organizing in another capacity where you're trying to start an organization that's working for justice, then the first thing that you can do to resist imperialism, since we see from the slide that imperialism is as lenient to Africa as music is to songs, as love is to emotion, and so on and so forth. So the first thing you can do to resist imperialism is to not use the imperial language, to not use the colonial borders that they have so eloquently taught you, to not further propagandize how individualistic and how separatist this system has wanted you to be, which means you should stop referring to yourself as African American. It means you should stop referring to yourself as Black. Those are terms that were created by racist bigots, Carl Linnaeus and Kant, who created the racial classification system. Why are we using their terms? Why aren't we just using African? Because that's who we are. And if you don't think you can do it, just give it a shot. You'll be surprised how natural it starts to come to you. You'd be surprised. And more importantly, you'd be surprised at how other people are impacted by you as well, where people in your inner circle will start to say African. And then you'll say to them, well, why are you saying it? And they'll say, well, I know you like to say it. It's not about me. It's about you saying it, and I'm impacting you to say it. And now we're starting to de-center colonialism. We're starting to de-center those things. Last thing I'll say, and I'll turn it back to you, Comrade Ajamu, is we see people fighting all over the world, you all. So the novelty has not worn off, contrary to what I said. But we have to embellish the novelty. We have to prioritize the novelty. We have to help people understand that it is still relevant even today. We have to help people understand that even though the University of Memphis does not have a Pan-Africanist organization that is fighting for justice, they even understood as college students, where we had Palestinian students, we had LGBTQ students, we had students who were differently abled coming together with Africans to literally chase out Kyle Rittenhouse because he was invited to campus, and these organizations that were oppressed and colonized did not want this bigot person on campus. So we see examples like that are happening in Sudan, where the Sudanese people are very clear of what they need to do to get those you know what's out of their space. And we see it all around the world. We've seen it in Haiti. We've seen it in Guinea-Bissau. We've seen it time and time again. The novelty is here. It is in our face. The question just becomes, are you interested in doing something about it because it has something to do with other people, not just you? Or are you so wrapped up in your own needs that you don't even want to fight for somebody else because you're too selfish to understand that it's actually your responsibility? Ashe.
Ashe, Obrigada, Asante Sana, Medasi. Thank you very much. Just a couple of points I wanted to add on before we start talking about, what's exactly happening in Sudan. Based on what you said, Shakur, is that, I know, like, we've been doing this a while. We know how people think about things. And a lot of people, like, when we say things like, call yourself African instead of Black or African American, because Black or African American are terms that are created by the people oppressing us. And that's absolutely true. But I know how these people think, and their response is because we don't think deeply about anything. Everything's superficial, surface level. So the way people think is, well, Africa, that word wasn't created by us either. Look, I said this a million times, I'll say it a million more. The point is, we have to be connected to the continent. You can call the continent party people land if you want to, if that makes you feel better. We are party people then. That's the point, is we have to be connected to the continent known as Africa. I don't give a goddamn what you call it. You can call it whatever the hell you want to call it. If we're going to move forward, we got to be connected to that land base. This goddamn empire is on its way out. And so many of us that live here are still trying to integrate in Dr. King told you 50 years ago, you're trying to integrate into a burning house. So we're not trying to do that. That's what we're talking about. So please don't be confused about that. And then the other thing is, just want to give credit, because if you're involved in this struggle, there's so many reasons to be optimistic. So many reasons. The only people that aren't optimistic are people that are just sitting in front of the TV letting your master propagandize you. But those of us who make a sincere effort to do the work, we see the work happening. So there are groups like, I always want to give respect to indigenous groups like the Ilahi Spirit Runners. They push the organization line harder than anyone I have seen, other than the way we do it in the APRP. And I think it's inspiring to me when I see them pushing it, because that's exactly what needs to happen. Stop all this liberal, well, you can do whatever you want to do. How is that working out for us? And then we had another young comrade, Shakur knows as well, young comrade, brother Eduardo, who I watched do a presentation for the El Partido de la Unida, who's an organization that he is working with. And he said the same thing, like talking to folks that identify as Chicano. This is universal science, you all. And so I just want to start with, Shakur mentioned John Garang, and John Garang is a very important figure in the history of the Sudan. Before the country split in 2011, John Garang in 1983 played a significant role in founding the Sudanese People's Liberation Movement and the Sudanese People's Liberation Front. And these different wings of the same movement were very critical at that time in the early 80s, because they had a clear direction to fight within the Sudan to make sure that the Sudan created a secular state. And when we say that, we're not saying that people can't be religious. We don't give a damn what religion you practice. As Malcolm X said, if it's not doing more for you than what it is right now, you shouldn't be talking about it anyway. But if that's your thing, more power to you, as long as your religion is focused on making the world a better place. We're tired of that dumbass argument. Were you trying to stop us from having our religion? Where have African people been stopped from? They love to have us practice colonial slave religion. They love for us to do that. Nobody's saying you can't do anything. We're just saying that we want a secular society where people have the opportunity to exist as they see fit. And the primary objective is to improve the conditions for the masses of people. And no government, no corporation, no religion, no entity is going to stand in the way of that objective. And that's what the Sudanese People's Liberation Movement was committed to doing. Now, that's important because from the very beginning, the work of John Garang and the other people who contributed to the formation of the Sudanese People's Liberation Movement was sabotage. And we'll talk about, who the saboteurs are, but we'll talk about that more in a second. But want to just go back and talk about Sudan being a country of 25 million people. And as Shakur mentioned, in 2011, the struggle reached the tipping point where the country split. And Sudan changed from being just Sudan to Sudan, and then South Sudan, which exists today as of 2011, which is a separate country, totally sovereign from Sudan. And the reason why that's important for a number of reasons. But one of the reasons I want to highlight is if you go back to 2011, because some of us are honest about history, and a lot of us are not honest. And if you go back to 2011, I remember clearly a lot of Africans were talking about, well, the problem in Sudan before the country split and South Sudan became the 54th country in Africa, 54th recognized country in Africa. Before that happened in 2011, a lot of Africans at that time were saying that, well, the problem in Sudan, it's an Arab versus Black conflict. Y'all remember that? Some of you were saying that, even though you won't admit it today, but some of you were saying that. It's an Arab versus Black conflict. And so South Sudan is primarily people who would, quote unquote, be classified as Black. So they need to split and have their own country to get away from these Arab oppressors. That's what a lot of us were saying back at that time. So that happened in 2011. The country split. South Sudan is its own country now. But today in 2024, the conditions in Sudan and the conditions in South Sudan are no better than they were in 2011. So clearly the issue is much deeper than just this sham analysis that, well, the problem is Arabs against Africans or Black people, as so many people claimed at that time. Clearly the problem is much deeper than that. And we've always said that because we have a class analysis within the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. We don't suffer from just having a race analysis like a lot of our people. And we don't suffer from just having a class analysis like a lot of white leftists. We have what we call a nation, class, gender analysis. We have an analysis on all three components of human life. And that's why people have problems with us, because that's thinking deeply about the problems that impact our lives. And so many of us just want a quick answer, a superficial answer, an answer that doesn't take any thought to give, because we just want to be able to feel better about the situation. If we're not doing a goddamn thing to change this world, if all we're doing is just making sure that we take care of ourselves and our biological family, then we want to feel better about that. So if we just have a quick answer that's not really addressing the core issue, then that's all a lot of us really want, is just that justifies our sorry state of existence as human beings. But some of us are not satisfied with that. We want to go deeper. So we've said from the beginning that this analysis, like people always like, well, the Arabs sold us into slavery. Yeah, so did Africans, so did Black people. This is the class analysis. Yeah, but we also know that when because we're not confused like a lot of people. So when people talk about, well, then, okay, so you can't talk about slavery. No, because the question is every country on earth has had some form of slavery. No question about that. Every country on our earth, 200 countries, they've all had some form of it. But that's different than the transatlantic slavery. Why is it different? Because today in 2024, and I know most people don't know this, even though they act like they do, they don't, because nobody's talking about this. Everybody's talking about the first part I mentioned. Well, slavery, everybody sold slaves. Black people sold each other slaves. Arabs sold each other. So why are we talking about that? Well, we're still talking about it, dumbass, because that's not a deep enough analysis. The real analysis is that in 2024, as Shakura alluded to, the world as we know it has been financed based on the transatlantic slave trade. There's nothing in your life today that's impacted deeply by whatever Arabs did in the slave trade, whatever quote unquote black people did in the slave trade. These people want to talk about all this nonsense all the time. Well, there were black people in the US who owned slaves. What impact, what difference does that make to my life in 2024? Not a goddamn thing. But the fact that Africa was colonized and that millions of Africans, not just one or two that some Negro in Philadelphia owned, but millions of us were kidnapped by a system of colonization. And the capitalist system that dominates world economics today was started from that process. That's what we're talking about in 2024. We are not confused. And if you are, then do what Kwame Ture said. When you're sick, you take an aspirin. Why not when you're ignorant, don't you read a book? Because we got to stop this nonsense and this foolishness today. That's what we're talking about. So when we look at Sudan and the current conflict, it's being defined as, again, Sudan is now what used to be known as North Sudan, is now Sudan, and then you have South Sudan, right? We just explained that. But the conflict today is being defined as the Sudanese government fighting against the so-called Rapid Support Services militia. And this is critical because this fighting has killed and displaced millions of people. And if you look at a map, which most people don't do, never in life bother to look at a map. Don't know anything about the world, but always have an opinion about everything, right? So if you look at a map, you'll see that Sudan is in central North Africa, surrounded by other countries who have significant conflict taking place. Ethiopia, the Congo, Chad, those types of countries that have this. So this is very important because when you have millions of people trying to escape this conflict, it creates an even greater burden on the surrounding countries who because of the conflicts they have, cannot even address the concerns and needs of the people who already live there. So this contributes mightily to the instability throughout the entire African continent. And the central thing about this is this so-called Rapid Support Services militia is nothing but the same old Janjaweed militia that existed before the country split in 2011. And if you study any of that history, you know that the so-called Janjaweed people were responsible for a lot of the terrorism that happened in the Darfur region in the former united country of Sudan, which terrorized millions of people. And a lot of this was ignited because this picture is this man, Omar al-Bashir, who was the president of North Sudan at the time. And, you know, the people say, well, it's an Arab, black guy. You see this guy on the street, you think he was black. You know, this is how crazy this analysis is. But he identified as Arab. And this was the source of the conflict, is that these oil analysts at that time, 2010, a couple of years before that, had discovered massive oil wealth in primarily what's known as South Sudan today, right? And so this is why the capitalist countries were all in favor of South Sudan splitting from North Sudan and forming its own country, because their vision was that it would make it that much easier for them to get into South Sudan and exploit those oil reserves. And that, since 2011, is exactly what they've been doing. You thought that they were interested in South Sudan because they care about quote unquote black people. I mean, if you're that stupid, I don't know what else to say to you. You know, clearly they have always a political and economic agenda. We're the ones who approach things from a primarily emotional standpoint with a superficial analysis of everything. They don't do that. The people that are oppressing us don't do that. They always have an analysis that's based upon their interests. So 20 plus years ago, this is what happened. Al-Bashir was the poster child of this alleged Arab-Black conflict, but a lot of this was about trying to get to the resources. Multinational corporations, the same usual suspects, trying to do what they could to create further destabilization and instability so that they could get to the resources. And there was no better place where they could do that than Sudan. So now your question might be, well, then what does this have to do with what's happening now? Why is North Sudan having this conflict when the oil is in South Sudan? And the reason for that is that, yes, the oil primarily, most of it left with the succession of South Sudan, and the capitalists are fast at work trying to figure out how they can best exploit that. And they feel like it's easier for them to do that now that they don't have a united Sudan. See, this is what Secretary talked to us about when he talked about Africa's history being different than Europe's history. And he talked about how Europe has evolved from a nation to a state. You know, if you look at the history of Europe, there's no question he was right. He talked about this before you had all these balkanizations in Europe now, where you had, before you had the split up of Yugoslavia, and before you had the split up of Czechoslovakia and all of these things that have happened, before there was even a place called Croatia or Serbia. None of this had taken place. And Secretary talked about it. This is the history of Europe and how Europe has evolved. And our history is different as African people. And he talked about Africa has evolved differently, largely because of colonialism, but that we are fighting not to move from becoming a nation to a state, but to move from states to a nation, because the states in Africa have all been created by colonialism. So that's why us as Pan-Africanists, we didn't see the succession of South Sudan and South Sudan becoming a separate country as a positive development for Africa's future and the ability of Africa to become self-determinative and to positively influence the lives of the millions of our people. We didn't see that like that because we knew that there was more to the story than what was being presented at the time. And I'm talking about it like this because some of these Negroes never learned. You know, they totally propagated imperialism's agenda for Sudan in the early 2000s, and now they move on to something. Now it's the Congo or something else that they're sabotaging. And we're not saying, like, you know, clearly our people in South Sudan felt like they needed to have their own country. And I totally respect that, understanding the conditions that they were dealing with at the time, especially as it relates to what was happening in Darfur. We know about that. I'm not confused about any of that. So I understand it. I'm just saying we cannot just look at what the effect is. We have to look at what causes the effect also. A lot of us are good at looking at the effect. Well, we see what happened. You know, that's what happened. You know, there are Africans in prison because they broke the law and sold drugs. That's the effect. But what's the cause of that? Why do so many of us have to sell drugs in the first place? So we got to look at all of that. That's why Kwame Ture was right when he said any analysis about our people that does not include our enemies is an incomplete analysis. Any analysis about Sudan that does not include imperialism is an incomplete analysis. So yes, we have to look at what happened in Darfur. We have to look at what happened with some of the folks in North Sudan and what they were doing to people in South Sudan. but that's only part of the puzzle. We also have to look at the manipulative role of imperialism in the whole process and what they were focusing to do. And clearly, if we look at what's happened, as I've already explained, at the end of the day, that's clearly dominantly what has taken place, the imperialist agenda. So now you have the oil in South Sudan. The imperialists are working diligently to exploit that. And then now you have what was formerly North Sudan, which is now Sudan. And again, here are these people come again, these so-called industry analysts, and they're saying that Sudan, or formerly North Sudan, has untapped reserves. That means that nobody's even done anything with these resources yet. Reserves means they're there. They're there. There's enough to last for a number of years, you all, and no one's done anything with it yet. Untapped reserves in gold, in uranium. And you know, you make power, you make electricity from uranium. And most of the uranium being produced in the world today is coming out of various parts of Africa, the Congo, Niger, places like that. We've already talked about, when we talked about what was happening in the Sahel region in Africa, go look at the video. We talked about how the uranium from Niger is a former French colony, and the uranium from Niger lights up all of Paris. 1 out of 3 houses in goddamn Paris is lit up by Nigerian uranium, while the people in Niger have to suffer constant blackouts. This is how this capitalist imperialist system works against us. We should be rich as a people from controlling our own uranium, yet we control none of it. So now, as if what they're doing in Niger wasn't enough, as if what they're doing in the Congo wasn't enough, as if what they're doing in all of Southern Africa isn't enough, now these goddamn pirates have found untapped resources and reserves of gold and uranium and chromite and gypsum in Sudan. And chromite and gypsum are products that you use, like you see the picture of chromite, it can be used to bend steel. It's a natural mineral that can be used to bend steel. So these automobile manufacturers need that. Like, you all love these, oh, this car, the aerodynamic design is so nice. Well, the way you're able to do that is by using things like chromite to do that. And then gypsum is a resource that's used for plaster, which is very important in the construction industry. So that's what these goddamn pirates are doing now. And so they're fomenting, arming, training, helping all these militias to have all the weapons they need to commit all the destruction they need to commit, encouraging and ensuring the continued instability in that region of Africa, which does nothing to help African people anywhere on earth, but does everything to help Sudan. And so on that note, I'll quote that great philosopher, the comedian Chris Tucker, from the movie Rush Hour, when, I don't remember which one, but he tells Jackie Chan, you want to know how to figure out what the problem is, follow the white man with the money. Although that's a, simple statement, y'all love simple statements so much, that is actually a very accurate statement. Because, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So sometimes this superficial surface analysis can have something going for it. And that's one of those examples, because without question, if you want to understand what's going on in the world, why the problems that exist in the world, follow the European capitalists and you will get your answer. No question about that. You will get your answer. So we just want to say, in closing on this question, that yes, the crooks and the thieves are creating sabotage in Sudan, in the Congo, in Ethiopia, in Azania, in Zimbabwe, in Somalia, in every part of Africa that they possibly can, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in Senegal, everywhere in the African continent, these International crooks and thieves are creating instability. But as we know, as Kwame Nkrumah told us, oppression breeds resistance. So the more that they do to sabotage Africa, well, only thing that's going to do is wake our people up. The only thing that's going to do is help our people in the diaspora understand, like we did in 1945, when more Africans attempted to sign up to join the Ethiopian army to drive invading Italy out of Ethiopia. These are Africans, never been to Africa at that time, and pretty much all of them never did get to ever get to Africa, but they had that national consciousness that what they're doing in Africa today is doing nothing but bringing that back. And that's exactly what we want, and that's exactly what we need. So we're not the least bit discouraged today. We're not upset. You might think we're upset because you don't understand how passionate we are about our people being free. And you've been trained to think that any type of conflict is negative, where we understand that we got to have conflict to change these conditions we suffer under. Because the people who are oppressing us will never give up their power until we organize and take it. So we're overwhelmingly optimistic today. And we know that the work that we're doing is having an impact. We get attacked too often for that not to be the case. So that's why we say keep the attacks coming, because they help us recognize that we are doing exactly what needs to be done. Sudan will be free. Congo will be free. Ethiopia, Africa will be free. African people all over the planet will be free. The indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere will be free. The Palestinian people will be free. And all of you European capitalists and all of you wannabe European capitalists and want to wake up tomorrow and hope that you are a European capitalist when your eyes open tomorrow, get on your goddamn kayaks and paddle your asses to Europe, because we are going to run your asses out of our homelands if that's the last thing that we do. We thank you for joining us today. We invite you back next week. I will not be here. I'll be engaged in some work that's none of your damn business, because people, just we're not ready to share information the way we need to. I wish we could, but we got too many people that do free police work for them. I'm not doing anything illegal by these people's laws. It's not the point of that. It's just that a lot of us are so naive. We think that, well, as long as you're not breaking any laws, you have nothing to worry about. I mean, that you sound stupid saying that. That doesn't even grasp how stupid that logic actually is. So we do work to advance humanity. Shakura will be here, and we will have a program. April is Women's Maternal Mortality Month. African women all over the world, indigenous women, even European women experience this, of course, so she will be here talking about that. Please don't sleep on that program. It's a very important program, and you should be here for it. The QR code in the top left-hand screen will take you to all of the APRP programs. We have many of them. And the Forward Ever shop, you can go there, buy clothes that reflect the values of the Pan-African revolution, support our struggle. You support Black business, to hell with that. Support Revolutionary African Organization first, and then support some Negro who's not putting any money in it. You can't question how much resources we put back with our people. I guarantee you we put more than any of these businesses that are doing something, if they're doing that. Most of them ain't doing anything. Go to betterup.me, run information on these videos. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to aprp-intl.org and support our project on the ground at Burkina Faso. The bottom right QR code, do that. Do that, please. Buy my book. That's how I finance my travels, trying to organize people. A guide for organizing defense against white supremacist, patriarchal, and fascist violence. We hope that you are well this Sunday. You should be very optimistic. We have nothing but optimism. I look at this. We have a 4-month-old puppy here. It's going to be we don't know what it is yet because it was abandoned, but we think it's like a pit bull and a bull mastiff. Going to be a big dog. But her spirit is unwavering. She consistently comes to interact with you no matter what. We got to be more like that. I look at her and I'm like, oh my God, I got to do this. You want me to do it? But I'm like, that kind of relentlessness is what we need. So I thank her for that inspiration. That's the ancestor speaking to me through this puppy. So we call her beautiful in Swahili because that's what it is. So be strong, you all. Be positive. Be encouraged and get involved. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.